Well, thanks for coming. I think we'll probably have people trickling in, but you all are prompts, so we'll start. Thank you for coming tonight. I was thinking, it's always hard to know as an artist what people want to hear you say, because I think the process of painting is so different than the process of looking at art. You know, even if you're an artist looking at somebody else's art, you don't have that experience of creating it. So sometimes it's just really hard to know what is interesting or what people want to learn about it. But I just thought I would talk a little bit about both my process of actually painting and then also my process and kind of journey throughout the years, starting from when I was very little. So I'll show you some kid art, but not too much of that. But just to give you a sense of different phases that I've been in, and as I said in my introduction email, just how sometimes it seems like some things are very linear as an artist, and then some things are kind of cyclical and come back, and then some things are just these random weird one-off phases that happen, and then you don't do anything like that ever again. And then also just like life, how sometimes the way your work changes is very circumstantial and serendipitous, and sometimes it's very gradual and progressive. So I was just hoping to show a little bit of that in my path by showing both the way that I paint and just talking about some different pieces of work from throughout the years and what I was doing at the time and thinking at the time. And I just kind of wanted this to be a casual chat, so feel free to raise your hand and ask me a question, interrupt me when you want to. So I was going to start by starting an actual painting that I'm going to be doing for a show in Bozeman, and the show is sort of a autobiographical journey. So I'm going to be doing paintings from lots of different places that I've lived, or even places that I've just visited, like Iceland, for a few days, that really made an impact on me. Because sometimes I think you can live somewhere a long time and not really be impacted by it, the landscape or the cityscape, or you can be somewhere just on a travel and really think about those couple days for the rest of your life. So it's not, the locations I chose were not necessarily places I've lived, but just places that I've felt impacted by. So you're here to witness me picking which painting I'm gonna do.
You get to vote?
Well, no, I get to choose. But I'll show you the ones I'm choosing between. So this one was at the far, so I rented a camper bus, and or like a truck with a camper on it, and drove through the Kjolar route, which is a dirt road to the middle of Iceland that goes in between two of the ice fields, and ended up at the northernmost tip. And this was like right around the solstice, so this was probably around 11:30 at night, and I got to watch the sun just like dip down and dip back up. It was really cool.
Oh my gosh, wow.
And I totally lost track of time and was only sleeping about 4 hours a night because of the light situation. And then this is also in Iceland, and this was on the way back from visiting this coastal town not too far from that other photo. And this one, the photo isn't all that great, but for me, I just remembered the lighting of it was so beautiful, how the light came and kind of was misty through this valley. And sometimes for me, the photos that I work from the best are the ones that are a little bit nondescript, but maybe there's a little something I want to emphasize in it, or just a memory of how it felt that I want to get into the painting. So I think I'm going to go with this one. Maybe I'll do this one another time. I forgot that I wanted to start, here, I'm recording this too, so because some people wanted to see it later. So this is the one. I forgot I wanted to start with this quote from Georgia O'Keeffe. For me, it really wraps up the artistic process more than anything I've ever heard. And the more I think about it, it sort of wraps up, or kind of describes life in general, just the journey of life and learning and progressing. So she says, "It is only by selection, by elimination, and by emphasis that we get to the real meaning of things." So I think no matter what kind of art that you do, you can really, or I would think that many people can relate to that. So selection, elimination, and emphasis, to me, is really what the creative process is all about. And life too, like you're choosing what's important to you, getting rid of the things that are not, and really seeing what you can bring out in the world. Hi. Okay, so I'm going to be going back and forth between painterly process and work. A lot of people ask me about the materials that I use and how I paint, what kind of brushes I use, so I thought giving a demo of starting a painting would be a good way to cover some of those bases. And Joan is a student of mine, so sure she's excited about that. So I work from photos for the most part in my larger work, not for my little guys, but just out of practicality, really. That's the way I do it these days. Let's see. So this is basically my studio right here. This and a wall. It's all of my paint. I decided rather than try to pick out what I was going to need, it would be better just to bring my whole part. Hello, welcome. So this is my, hi, welcome. Get settled. You're all just in time for my demo. These are my demo. So I want to read that quote one more time because for those of you who just came in, this is really a quote that wraps up the artistic process for me and describes a lot about the way I see painting. So it's George O'Keeffe says, "It is only by selection, elimination, and by emphasis that we get to the real meaning of things." All right, so this is my wax medium, and it's mixed with a little bit of linseed oil. And as you can see, it's kind of like a putty, sort of like Vaseline, and it's emulsified wax paste. And then I add more oil to it. It's already melted down into oil when I get it. So I throw some of that out of my palette, and I add a little extra oil, this is walnut oil.
Excuse me, please, Rachel.
Yes.
Do you like to work from a muted print, like on paper, or from a computer screen?
It's a good question because it really changes the outcome. So Jen was asking if I like to work from a computer screen, or sometimes I'll have my phone or my iPad or paper. And I've tried lots, and environmentally speaking, I've been through phases where I don't want to print things out and I want to just work from my screen. But I like the dullness of just cheap prints, and I like that some of the details are washed out. If I'm doing portraits, I kind of do both. I have a photocopy that I use to kind of sketch it out, and then I kind of refer to the a photo on a screen to get more details. But yeah, it changes the way that I work, and just having that interaction with the screen, I feel like is a little bit of a distraction. So. So I prefer just printed out paper. Yeah, and usually I work with smaller images too, so I feel like I can see the whole thing at once a little bit better, kind of like you do on your phone. Sometimes you notice something in a photo on your phone that you didn't notice when you saw like the bigger picture, like maybe something if you take a photo of a room or something. So I do like smaller images also for that reason, because I can hold it in my hand, see the whole thing, and kind of get a grasp for the composition all at once. And I do that with my work too. I'll take photos of it and look at it on the screen. I'm going to turn this around. Okay, so I'm mixing up my walnut oil with my wax paste. I don't use any turpentine or paint thinner except for cleaning my brushes. I find I can do what I want with just the oil. So sometimes, so my mom is here, and she's a quilter, and it's funny because quilters have this saying that they're crazy because they take a piece of fabric and they cut it apart and they sew it back together, and they cut it apart and they sew it back together. But sometimes I feel like that with painting, where you're taking this raw material and you're organizing it. Basically, I like organization and tidiness, and I feel like painting is kind of this way of making a chaotic, uncohesive thing cohesive. Okay, so colors. I often start out with the sky, so that's what I'll do right now. I do just a little bit of mixing on my palette. I mix up move this so you can all see everything. I mix up the paste with the paint to begin with, so I get a little bit of a more mixable, soft texture to begin with. Do a little color matching. And I do try to use as few paint colors as possible. So sometimes I'll just start out with, you know, the primary color. So if I'm working in a dark area like this, it'll be a deep blue, like a alizarin crimson, and then some sort of orangey yellow or ochre sort of color. And then in the sky, kind of the same thing, but just in lighter versions. It's funny to have my studio here. This is translucent yellow. It's one of my favorite paints. It looks really mustardy at first, and then a translucent paint, when you add white to it, it gets really brilliant. So you saw that kind of dark color, mustardy color. And then I'll show you what it looks like when you mix it with some white. It's kind of a surprise. I call it like magic yellow. It's kind of really bright. And that's a really great color for me for like the edges of clouds where the sun is right behind. Translucent yellow. So for skies, I often do the clouds first and then sort of work in the negative around them for the blue part or the background. And that's just so I could keep the whites really white and the darks really dark. A little more white. Forgot to put on my apron that I especially bought. I was gonna wear my overalls, and I thought that's a little too casual. So I brought this instead. Okay.
You look so natural in that apron. It's probably one of your best friends.
I don't wear this one too much. I have these really messy, unflattering overalls that I like a lot. I wore them when I was pregnant, and I still really like them. Okay, so as far as starting with the composition, I just sketch out with vine charcoal. And one thing I like about vine charcoal is it rubs off really easily. And it's just a burnt twig. One of my favorite things to do is to draw or paint like burned trees with them, because it's like you're using the same material that you're painting to do it. So I just do a minimal sketch. The surface I'm working on is a raw linen that has been primed with a clear acrylic. So one thing I've noticed about the way I like to work is I really like diagonal lines. So a lot of my compositions, you can look around and see, have either like a serpentine sort of S composition, or they've got these angles coming at each other. So when I'm sketching it out, those angles are sort of what I'm paying the most attention to. That's about all I do for the underdrawing. And then I'm going to start out with the sun. A lot of my paintings have had this big, bright white sun as the focal point. So as I was saying before, I really like I like tidiness and I like efficiency. So when I paint, I don't do a lot of do as few strokes as I can, and those who have taken my class know I challenge them sometimes, can you do a little painting in like 8 strokes? And what it makes you do is it makes you really look at what you're painting. You know, if you're painting from life, you're looking a lot more than you're actually painting, because you got to make each stroke count. And one way that I make it interesting still is I load my brush with different colors at the same time. Not quite yet, but the second time we'll show you that. For those of you who don't paint and aren't going to paint, I won't be painting this whole time. We'll talk about my work too. I just wanted to start with this demo. Okay, so I get the bright area blocked out that way. And then here's where I do some double loading of the brush. So I'm going to take that same brush and that magic yellow. Actually, I need a little bit of pink too. I have magic pink also. So it's also one of those translucent colors. It looks really dark straight out of the tube, but then you add some white to it, and it's just this like bubblegum pink that I use for a lot of sunsets. So here's magic pink with a little bit of white in it. Okay, so mix a little bit of the wax medium and oil in with that. It's kind of like cooking. It's like a cooking show. And then I'm going to just dab the corner of this brush into that yellow because I want the edge to just be kind of tinged by it. And I'm going to go along. And create that kind of glow. So there's how I work with the white part. Okay. Normally I do a little more work there. I'm going to move on to the dark part of the cloud and show you how I do that. I really like these $1 brushes. And the older they get, the more paint gets stuck in them, and they get this just, you know, 1/2 inch or like 1/4 inch of pliable brush bristle to them. And that's when they're really good. This one's really old. This thing, the top falls off of it a lot. Okay, so I like to put a little oil on there first, just to kind of prime the brush. Okay, so I'm going to work with some indigo blue. This is I don't use black. I use indigo blue, and if I want it like less blue, I'll add some of the other primary colors to it to make it more dark or less blue. As I'll do here. So far I just have 4 colors out. The dark blue I don't really count as a color. It's more of just like a dark. And I'm going to do my dark red, which is this alizarin crimson. Add that in, and then my dark yellow that I was saying in the beginning. So basically I'll be using 6 colors for this whole painting. Is this orangey yellow, and it's nice to mix in with the dark colors. It doesn't lighten them up very much, but it really greens up the tone and really dulls up the tone. So I use it actually in the sky a lot. Okay,
what's the name of your dark yellow?
Dark yellow. This particular one is cadmium yellow deep. Some more oil, prime this brush. Okay, so here's a flat brush that I use a lot, and this is the, when you see strokes that I do, this is actually probably the brush that I used for the leaves down here. So like that's one brush stroke with lots of different colors on it. Okay, so I'm going to be working this area right here. And I'm mixing a little bit of white in with that blue, but I'm also just picking up some of that yellow and maybe a little bit of red. I just like to get a lot of color in my darks. Sometimes with clouds I blend a little bit more, and sometimes I don't. It just kind of depends on how the painting's feeling towards the end. I forgot about that brush I was talking about that I like so much. This one's good for real thin, translucent work. So if I want to just do a little more blending and thinner application, I use that. So I like the diagonals both in the composition and then also just in the angles of the brush strokes. Tighten it up a little bit. And I love to see like the surprises that come out on the brush. You know, when I just do a stroke and maybe I didn't know there was a color on there, or maybe I did and decide whether to leave it or not. But usually I leave as much as I can. Like sometimes I'll start with one brush stroke and you'll still see that one brush stroke at the very end of the painting. Like sometimes I can remember which brush stroke was the first one. Trying to think on these ones. Sometimes it's really obvious and sometimes it's not. But yeah, regardless if there's one big bold brush stroke or not, most of the strokes that you see are not blended or retouched. They're just kind of the first stroke that came out. So if you see this painting finished later on, you might recognize that start. Just do a little bit more without talking. Normally I have like 6 brushes in my hand at the same time. It's funny, when I go for a massage, it's actually my left hand that's usually the tightest because I'm like clenching all these paintbrushes in it. So I'm gonna quit there, but I thought that might be fun for people to see me start a piece, and I'll post this later if you're curious to see the end result. But do anybody have any questions about any of that?
Just a quick one about color, because you mentioned you don't ever use black, so there's no black.
That that has no black in it. Yeah, that it has a lot of charcoal. So on that painting, yeah, I use big thick. I actually used all of my big thick charcoal on them. I don't have any in here, but just the more standard little sticks that are about ½ inch wide. And my floor in my studio, which was really clean before that, was just like black with charcoal dust, and I was cleaning it for a couple weeks. But yeah, although dark in there, you see is like the darkest dark is the charcoal that I then painted that indigo blue over, and it mixes in together and gets even darker. I don't like the smell of black paint. That's like my big. Yeah, I don't know what mineral is in there that smells, but yeah, I just really like the smell of it. So, and I like things to be as rich in color as possible too. So you mix your own black. It's more interesting to me than from the two. Yeah.
Do other colors smell different from others?
That's the only one that I really noticed has like a particular smell.
Yeah.
Yeah, they all kind of have their own like feel to them, and I have like it's almost like candy to me. I have like a salivatory response to paint colors. I don't know, Randy, if you get that too, but they're like I can taste them almost.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they each have like a physical response for me, but that black paint I just don't like the smell of. It's probably not good for you. Yeah, it's probably toxic. There's probably a reason I don't like it. Anything else about just like actual painting before I move on? Okay. If you think of something, feel free to interrupt. Gosh, how long? Okay. It goes faster when I'm painting than when I'm talking for me. Yeah, so coming back to that quote about selection, elimination, and emphasis, as I paint, I feel like I'm doing those 3 things, and then as I see the way my work has changed and or not changed and cycled through over the years, I feel like those 3 words really relate also. So I'm going to start. You'll see I'll come full circle at the end of this one. So this is a piece of scrap wood that my dad used to cut out and let me draw on. So this is for my mom. Michael, that's my mom right next to you. So, yeah. And then again, my mom saved this. A lot of you have seen this in my studio before when I grew up. I wanted to be an artist. I was in kindergarten. And people ask me all the time, like, did you always want to be an artist? And I think a lot of kids wanted to be an artist, so I'm always kind of dismissive of it. It's like, well, yeah, like, who didn't go through that phase? But it's fun to think about. Maybe I did know. Can't really think of too much else I wanted to be besides that. So I went through high school drawing a lot. I did a lot of colored pencils and some watercolors, mostly colored pencils, really painstaking. I have like a crooked finger from like sitting there and doing really like rich application of colored pencils. And that was very slow, and I liked the tidiness of it, but the efficiency factor was not there, as it is with oil paint. This I've had in my studio since college. I went to school in Southern California, Scripps College, and had a professor who influenced me a lot at Pomona College. His name was Enrique Martinez Celaya. He's a Cuban painter. And he was very mean and tough, and well, it was good though. Like he was sick of art being, a extracurricular activity, and he really taught his students to take it seriously. So I've always saved this because it's my grade from my sketchbook. It's like, who gets a grade for your sketchbook? Like, but we get grades for our sketchbooks. So it says, R, weak portfolio in comparison to you. Drawings need more power and more resolve, B+. I've always saved that because I thought like, it just inspires me to try to do a little bit better. So, and this was my first oil painting that I did in that class. I think I'll lay these out progressively as I go. Oh, I keep forgetting to show the camera. Come back for this one. Is that too close? No. Good? Okay. So after college, I got into this real kind of whimsical phase, and looking back, I think it was satisfying to me because I drew this grid, this very like culturally grid of equilateral triangles, and then I had a kaleidoscope that I used to do the pattern. This was one of my first ones. It's not one of my best, but it's one that I've kept. And then I would go in and sort of break up that pattern with an image over it. And I just really liked that push and pull between the structure and the organic image of the landscape. That was satisfying to me in some way. I think just the organization of it, and I've grown up seeing a lot of patterns of quilts probably influenced that. And then this was where I kind of got sick of the image and thought, what can I do with just the grid? This is my little dabbling in encaustic work. Sorry, I'm not showing this side of the work as well. I was going to pass stuff around. I'll start passing it around after I show it. So this is a different kind of wax work where you have to heat up the wax, and it's really time-consuming and tricky, and smells really good, but I think it's kind of bad for you also. And to master it, there's a couple encaustic painters in this studio, or in this gallery, and it's really difficult to work with, I think. So, but I thought that was kind of cool. I would do the grid, and then I would cover the grid up. I would do the grid with a knife and like slice it out, and then cover it up, and then use it with more encaustic paint, and then kind of wipe away layers and kind of reveal the pattern underneath. So just still playing around with that. So this phase is funny to me when I hear people say, oh, your work is getting so abstract or so geometrical, because it's like, well, this is where I came from, so I guess maybe it's going back and forth a little bit. Encaustic smells really good. So that was kind of post-college. And then I was kind of in transition between California and Idaho, and started to do some Idaho, well, what's afterwards? I started to do these little paintings. These are some later ones, obviously, because I didn't have kids yet when I moved to Idaho, but this was in Iceland, and this is later. But I just started doing these tiny expanse paintings because I didn't have a studio, and I wanted to be able to paint a lot without the studio. So I did thousands of these even before I started my daily ones, where I did that for every day for 4 years. Not consecutive years, but 4 different years. So here's some of my earlier tiny expanse paintings.
How do you like painting? You know, I love your little tiny ones.
Mm-hmm.
I love your big ones too. I mean,
Yeah.
you go from these huge big paintings and do these.
I guess I get bored. You know, it's fun to kind of have a size that you work with for a while, and you get really. It's kind of like a scientific experiment where you're eliminating variables, so you get just really fast and good at that one little size, because there's less to think about after a while.
Right.
And then I get, you know, stifled feeling and go big. But yeah, I think just the speed that I did those two really helped me with bigger paintings, because I just tried to, you know, go proportionally at the same rate that I went with the little paintings, which I did all on site, so working faster anyways. So yeah, I think the two complement each other, going back and forth between big and little.
So you just take a few paints with you and go out like this?
I didn't bring my kit, but I've got like a little box with my little oil paint kit and a little storage box for the wet painting. Yeah, or like if I'm doing a trip, like I did in Iceland, where I think I did 50 paintings in a week, and I have a storage box that holds up to 12, and by the time I'd done 12, maybe they were dry and I could put the new ones back in. So yeah, it's a little bit of a logistical challenge, but sometimes I've had people mail them home to me after a couple weeks too. Anyway, so then I moved to Boise, and this was one of the first Idaho landscapes that I did, and I was still working plein air at this time. I was a very dedicated plein air painter. I thought that working from photos really was like kind of cheating, or I don't know, not authentic, but at this point I've just realized it's just different, and the results are different. My plein air paintings become a little bit more less tidy. You know, there's a little more rough edges, and I don't go back in the studio and tidy them up. I like them how they are. I like a little bit of dirt from where I was working in them, and I like to just see the speed that I was working that didn't allow me to stop and, you know, make edges really sharp or shapes really defined. Do you guys want? And then I had kids, and that whole theory of plein air painting sort of changed, because the mornings and the evenings are when you can't really get away when you have little kids. So, and that's when you want to be out catching the sunrise and the sunset. So I did a lot of more work from photographs, and sort of got more comfortable with that later. So did a whole bunch of paintings of my daughter, just my first daughter. I have yet to do a bigger painting of my second daughter. I don't know when that will happen. So those are two from this book that I created called Paintings for Mairead. And my husband's a welder, and he made these frames. So yeah, I mean, I guess part of why I'm showing you all this different work is different life experiences, and I happened to marry a welder who could make these metal frames, and that changed the surfaces that I painted on. So I just like how your work can kind of follow your biography a little bit, and sometimes it's just happen chance the way things go. One thing that happened in between some of these early Idaho phases is I had this brush carrier, which I brought my brushes in tonight, and it's browned, and I was packing up to go plein air painting in the mountains, and it fell down and it rolled underneath my back patio gate and into the alley, and then I drove off and went painting and had none of my paintbrushes with me, and I never found them. And I had those paintings since, you know, some of them since high school, and they weren't all these flat, wide brushes, but when I went to replace my brushes, that's what I was really drawn to, and I've been painting with those flat brushes ever since. So losing my whole set of brushes, I think, was a good fresh start for me, and really changed my work. So that's one of these each way. And this one, the book is upside down, so that's the way it goes. So around that time, I started working a lot with conservation groups in Idaho. The first one was Advocates for the West, and then the next one was Idaho Conservation League. And I did this series of paintings called Paintings for Idaho, and this was one of the first ones. And this was a big phase for me. I was working on this panel that I primed with the red paint, and they all kind of have this glow to them because I left a lot of that red showing as sort of a linear element. And they're all really smooth and more blended than the work that I do these days. But that was one that I kept from that. And then I got really sick of doing just pretty landscapes that weren't touched by humans or messed up by humans. I just started to feel like that wasn't realistic. Like a lot of the landscapes that we see every day, you know, it has a lot of human impact on it. So I did this series called Intersections, and it was all, you know, man-made things or human-made things where they intersect with nature. And this was kind of one of the more playful ones that I did, just the airplane shadow on the clouds from above. Intersection 28. And so here I had gotten sick of the panels and I was working more on linen. You didn't have to prime it, it just comes with in this neutral color. I don't like just a white canvas to start. I really like to start with some sort of color or something, which I think is why I also like doing these paintings. Because in a way, once I got the pattern done, that's when the painting began, and I still wasn't starting with a blank slate. So I've gotten pretty comfortable with this linen being my starting point, just with the texture and the color. And I had the opportunity to do a series of paintings for NNU, Northwest Nazarene University. I did 14 portals, which was 14 landscapes in a circumference around Boise. And I think this was sort of me sort of really feeling at home in Idaho and really appreciating how many different landscapes there were within, I think my range was like 160 air miles. So this is Bruno sand dunes. And these were big, they're 4 feet by 8 feet. I had a bigger studio at the time and was able to, or a higher ceiling at least, it wasn't that big of a studio, but just one at a time I was able to do these. These were all on linen.
Were those done from photos?
These were done from photos, yeah. And I should have brought, sometimes I collage photos together, and sometimes I really like the collage at the end. I always keep them just in case I do another painting from it, or just for my records. But this particular painting probably was made up of about 12 different photos. I just wanted to get each of the elements in there. Because sometimes especially with these portals, I wasn't so accustomed to doing a portrait format. And so to get everything that I wanted to within that horizontal area, I had to kind of squish things together. This is from about 2 years ago. Let's see what word is in. This is a project called Ground, and during these years I had really been doing a lot of the tiny expanse projects, and I started to realize that wasn't super sustainable to do a painting every day for the rest of my life. So I started this monthly project, and this was Ground, and every month I would do a painting from kind of a survey of the plants in the same spot off of Bogus Basin Road. And some of you guys probably saw that show here. So this was a tiling of them. There was one of each of these originals, and then I made prints on metal of each one. Yeah, I do want to make a quilt out of that, actually. Let me pass this one around. And here's one of this is a print of one of the months. It was September of 2019. Yes?
You don't do any studies, you just jump right in.
Well, I see my little paintings as studies.
Okay.
Yeah, so I really do like to have painted on site when I'm going to be painting something larger in the studio. Just feel like there's so much you absorb when you're painting on site, like just the temperature and the wind and the smells. So that's one reason I don't often paint from other people's photos, because if I haven't been to the place, it's just really hard for me to feel like I captured it. I don't know the feeling of the place. And then COVID hit, and I did this series of work for it's called the CCG, the COVID Cultural Commission. And people were saying, oh, that's so different for you, but I actually did a series of paintings just like this, you know, not about COVID obviously, but in this style in college, where I was using different sizes of outlines of different figures and sort of layering them on top of each other and then going in with a thick palette knife. This is actually the only time in my life I've used a palette knife. I get asked a lot if I use a palette knife for my paintings now, but you can kind of see that, like, you know, there's more of a soft bristle stroke in those than here, where it's just a flat surface. And then, this is where we come full circle. I'm back to painting on recycled wood, like I started when I was like 4. So this is my current project that I'm working on. It's my next monthly project, and it'll be complete in November. And it's a big collage of the apple tree at the Botanical Gardens, the old growth apple tree. It's kind of next to that tree sculpture. And so the finished project will be a 9-foot by 12-foot collage. So there's 108 of these in it, and there's 9 paintings from each season, just randomly taken from the image of the tree. So this is C8, December. So, and then it was important to me that the wood was all recycled, so I have who gave me the wood on the back. Micron gave me a whole bunch, so I've just been painting on cardboard for some of them. But I thought I just really wanted to honor this tree by not using, you know, fresh other trees, but recycled trees. So those all hang on French cleats, and I think hopefully in the early 2022 I'll have that show up here.
Do they all form one?
It's one big image of a tree, yeah, with different pieces of the puzzle. So the last thing I wanted to share are my favorite paintings that I keep at my house, and these are, I never was really into portraits until I had kids, and I feel like that just forced me to, like, it's something I have to do. Like, I wasn't very good at it to start, and it's just really something I wanted to be able to give to my kids. So I've been doing a portrait of my daughters every year. So that was Radi's birth portrait. Should these go around, and this was her at 1. 2. These hang in my bathroom, so I see them a lot. 3, and yeah, 3. So I think as you start to, you know, be a professional artist, for money, you have to keep something that's like really, you know, these take a long time for me, and I never sell them. I'm just going to keep them. So it's really nice to have something that feels a little bit more personal. This was this year, kindergarten. I think I've gotten a little bit better at them as years go by. I have to repaint the early ones. This is Saoirse when she was born. And this is just last month. Sorry, I'm neglecting. Yes.
What size brush do you use for these?
I do, so in general with my paintings, regardless of the size, I start off as big as possible. And some paintings, like I may have done a couple of these just with one, you know, this brush and maybe one about this size. So I really try to cover a lot of space with each brush stroke, but with the little ones, I use a lot of these chiseled, forget what they're called, filberts, or they're flat and angled. Maybe that's what they're called, flat angular brushes. But these ones are cool because you can either do flat strokes or you can do linear elements with them if you turn them sideways, or you can even do like points, you know, like the reflections in the eyes. So sometimes I'll do a whole little painting just with this brush. Well, I hope that was interesting. Does anybody have any more questions? Yeah, so I think there's a little bit more time before 6. So if people want to just wander around and look at what I have laid out, and I have lookbooks from different years on the table in the back. And please check out Josh and Darcy's work also while you're here.
We have a talk tomorrow with Darcy as well. So
Okay, cool. From 5 to 6.
Yeah, if you'd like to
Darcy's
come
the
back to
sculptor.
that, we'll come back, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.